In this episode of OG55, I am joined by Jay Shear and the Italiano. We are breaking down, we are doing a full autopsy on the Starcruiser. What happened? What should have happened? What can they learn from this experience? It's been 1 year since Disney announced that this thing was going to close. We're going to talk about it, break it down up next on OG55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG55, where we talk all about the Starcruiser, the Galactic Starcruiser. We're going to do a full autopsy on it, what happened. But before we dive in, I'm going to introduce my fantastic panel. We got George, the Italiano. Welcome back, sir. And Jay, we like to refer to this outfit as his militant pixie duster outfit.
Exactly. And the Antifa Captain Hook.
There you go. Oh, George, if you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There he is. And we got Jay Shear, host of the Story Geeks show here on the channel and How Stories Work, his own YouTube channel. Jay, welcome back, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. By the way, I heard that if you say Galactic Starcruiser 3 times, Drunk 3PO will show up in your chat. so we'll see. We'll see if we can get Jay out in the chat, because that would be really fun if he's in the premiere chat. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. This was a really bold move by Disney. It's been a year. Jenny Nicholson has put out a giant 4-hour-long video that I have watched about this kind of similar subject. It's still on people's minds, even though it has been 6 feet under the ground for a year. It is still in people's minds. So I'm excited to talk about this with you guys.
It still gives me the twitches.
George is like, Jay, if you could
a hole in the wall behind him. By the end of this.
So Jay, if you could just remind everybody where they could find you on social media, or the few social medias that you now have still.
Yeah, sometimes I sneak back into X and I say something, but it's very rare. So mostly you can find me at How Stories Work with Jay Shear. I'm actually working on a couple of new videos over there. I am almost finished with my Citizen Kane Explained script, which I'll do a whole video on Citizen Kane and explaining that whole story. It's on AFI's top 100 as the best film of all time.
Great movie.
Yeah, and it influenced a ton of films, right? So I'm going to break that film down, which would be really fun. I may do a Deadpool explained video as well, if I can get to that soon. And people are demanding. I've had several comments demanding Sicario 2: Day of the Soldado, that I do another explainer video on that. So I got plenty of work on my hands. But you can find me over there, How Stories Work with Jay Shear, and you can find me right here on OG55 with the Story Geeks. And these guys are always joining me. George has another amazing idea for a Story Geek show. So probably after we finish this show, we will be talking about when we can schedule that one.
Yeah. We'll get to getting.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into our festivities. So the Starcruiser, right? This was a very... Look, it was an ambitious idea, and it was kind of Bob Chapek's baby, from what I'm hearing. He really kind of spearheaded this thing, right? This whole idea of like this, it's a cruise line kind of concept, but it's Star Wars, and it's out and out there in the galaxy, right? So it's kind of a cool concept. It didn't last very long though, and what was it like, George? Like a year, I think, total, maybe, not even.
Might have been a little over a year, but I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, it had very short legs. It was like a corgi, you know. It's like
actually, there's one right over there.
Yes.
He can't see him. He's like,
yeah, it didn't last very long. So Jay, I'm gonna start with you. What happened with this thing? Why did this thing fail?
There are a million different reasons why it failed. To be honest, like it's Bob, our buddy Bob Chapek, he flew too close to the sun.
Yeah.
No, I think that there's multiple reasons why it's failed. We'll get into a lot of those reasons. But I think that the core reason anything fails is that the audience that would love the thing never finds the thing, right? Like if you look at, like, I'm in the startup world, and so what I'm dealing with is, like, I have a bunch of clients who are trying to start businesses. The number one reason that people fail is not because they had a good idea, it's not because they had a bad idea, it's not any of those things. They could not figure out in time before they ran out of money a way for this audience to love this product and find each other, right? And one of the things that Jenny says in Jenny's video, which I think was just a brilliant thing to say, was that this was an experience that was really truly made for a very specific kind of person. You had to want to be like a LARPer. You had to want to get into this story idea, and really invest your time and energy in that. You had to treat it as if you were going to like a 2 to 3 day real life video game event, right? Like,
Right.
I had to devote an amount of time and energy to it and want to be that kind of person. But that kind of person is not like a ubiquitous kind of Disney audience. It's a small audience within the Disney community and within the Star Wars community. And so I don't think that they ever found that audience, because I don't think that audience is just loaded with cash, to be honest with you. And so I just don't think a lot of people knew what to think of it. I don't think they knew, like, they didn't really know, like, is this experience for me? Is this something I want to do? You have to talk about Star Wars, Disney Star Wars LARPers. That's like the core audience. How many of those people are out there, right?
It's like a niche within a niche within a niche. It's like those little Russian dolls, right? That are like,
Exactly.
I mean, there's just so many niches. By the time you get to it, it's like there's like 4 people left.
Yep. And then you combine that with a lot of other issues that I'm sure we'll talk about, the marketing issues, the storytelling issues that they had. And that's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a really hard pill to pay $6,000 for when you show up. So yeah, that's what I think the main reasons are.
You know, like when you watch like a movie trailer and then you go and see the film, and you walk out and you say, "Wow, I enjoyed the movie trailer more than the actual film itself."
Oh yeah.
This was not the case. Like, it was literally of what they presented with their marketing, their promoting, their TV specials, commercials, everything that they showed was exactly what you got, but not in a good way. it was for, I don't know. I think the idea was very, and I know a lot of people like posted saying, it's been 1 year to the day of like Disney's most technological ambitious project ever. And I'm thinking, I could think of a few off the top of my head that's like way above this. Like, I mean, but I think the idea was ambitious.
Yeah, that's
I feel like that they were going in a direction that they wanted to, but due to probably cost cuts, budgeting, what is a fantasy and what is a reality, and it's like, you want to do all this stuff, but could it really be done? And how can you do it in such a short amount of time for 2 nights, but at the same time justify that astronomical price where you could actually go on a Disney cruise for a 7-night and go to all these different destinations and have all these different experiences. But for 2 nights, you're basically role-playing and cosplaying. It's like, what, and I've never experienced it, thank God, because I wasn't going to spend that money for 2 nights, but I don't see what the appeal was to spend that. And I guess for me, it was probably a lot more of the diehard Star Wars fans on that side rather than the Disney people.
Yeah. And the thing too with this experience is it really, if you're not into the role play thing, right, or the LARPing is what they call it, right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Because okay, on a real cruise, if you're into characters and interactions and stuff like that, there's that for you to do on the cruise. If you're into just chilling on your balcony watching the water, you can do that. You can just have meals. You can go drink. On this thing, if you're not doing the LARPing, what are you doing? You're going to stare at a LED screen the whole time. Like, what are you going to do?
And
I into that, you know?
And I said it before we started recording, and I guess I kind of talked myself into the fact that I would be interested in doing something like that because, as I said, I'm an attention freak. Like, it's like I love to be the center of attention. Not that I absolutely need it, but it's just my personality. It's just I love to put on a good show. I love to be part of a good show. But I don't necessarily want and or need that during a Disney vacation that I'm already putting out a leg and an arm for. Time is crucial. Time is needed for a Disney vacation. Luckily, I'm one of the very few that I go so many times that I don't need to do everything in one day at one time. But for the sake of it, if I'm still going to travel, I still want to get my money's worth. So I at least want to enjoy the atmosphere and be in the moment. I don't want to be locked up in some Starcruiser for 2 nights, being forced to follow this storyline that they've, quite frankly, have been telling over and over and over again, even in the parks. It's like you're on the Starcruiser. Okay, the Starcruiser, it gets hijacked by Kylo Ren. Okay, so you go off into Batuu and you ride Rise of the Resistance. Oh, you get kidnapped by Kylo Ren. It's like, it's the same thing over and over again. There's no transitional storyline where it's like you get this like many layers. And Star Wars is a very layered, complex
generational
universe.
Thing.
Yeah, and they're just stuck on this one thing. I am like so sick and tired of Reylo. I'm like I'm done with it, and it's like I want to see something different. But
you know,
I think
they could have saved this thing too if they wanted to save it. They could have saved it by having various eras of the Star Wars universe. Itinerary. Like, so for example, from June 5th to June 20th, it's the prequels. So you have an Anakin Skywalker experience. From August 1st to the 30th, you have the OT. You got Leia, Luke. But they didn't do that. It's interesting.
But all in all, for me, this is something that I would have considered doing, but outside of a Disney vacation. Like, I would do it like for like a Comic-Con kind of thing, or maybe if it was like an on the road kind of thing where they say, hey, this is coming to a city near you for X amount of days, live out your Star Wars experience kind of thing. That's something that I would do. But to actually go to a Disney vacation and spend $6,000 for 2 nights, not really for me.
Well, Jay, I want to ask you, because that's an interesting point, right? So he would do it outside of a Disney vacation. So if you would have put the same experience, say, in Las Vegas, you think that would have changed the math a little bit?
Well, okay. So before I answer that question, I want to throw out there what I think they should have tested before paying for the Starcruiser. Okay, because I think that what you guys are talking about and what George just referenced is actually a really interesting idea. What if, rather than build the Starcruiser first, what if they had tested the idea by selling a day-long experience like they sell special tours? You guys did a special tour recently, last night, like the time before last, you were out at Disneyland. And this experience was a 15 to 20 person tour, but you got to be a part of the various shows. You got to dress up in a costume. You got to be a part of the various shows that take place in Galaxy's Edge. You got to stay late after the park closed for other special story elements where you could do special missions and things like that with the cast members in Galaxy's Edge. And you got to do that with whatever group you wanted to do. And they put a special price tag on it that was like, several $100s, maybe even getting close to $500 per person or something like that. I feel like you could have tested this idea out a little bit and worked out some of the things that make this awkward. right? Because like, let's break down, because what you're asking me is, do you think it would work better if it were outside of the parks, if it were not related to the parks? And the answer is like, I don't know, maybe, but see, because for me, the Starcruiser, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. George said the Starcruiser idea is not even on my radar as like a good idea. I'm not on that side. I'm on the side of like, this actually sounds like a really fun idea, but the execution was just all over the map weird. Because
Yeah.
like, for example, you asked me, would you want to go to this in Vegas? Would you want to go to it in Walt Disney World? I go, I don't know. But I tell you one thing I don't want to do. I don't want to be in that era of Star Wars. I'm not paying a bunch of money to be in that era of Star Wars, right? Like if you told me that this was going to be the type of thing where the grand enemy was going to be Vader and you had to defeat Vader, well, I've perked up, right? Like, what do you mean by that? You get to be on a 1970s Star Destroyer era type of thing. I'm into that too. That sounds really interesting to me. But they pulled back on a lot of that stuff, right? Like it feels like it was made for. It doesn't feel like it was made for 40-plus-year-old Jay. It feels like it was made for like my nephew who's 8, right? Like
That makes sense.
We're gonna do Star Wars. We're gonna do lightsaber training. Like, okay, I'll do that if I'm with my nephew and I'm encouraging him on how to do it. If I'm gonna do like, do you want to do 43-year-old lightsaber training, Jay? Like, no thanks. Like, I have no desire to look like a complete idiot in that environment, right? So like for me, I think the execution was conceptually, you go on a LARPing oriented experience. Again, you put me in Batu and I do that after hours with 15 other people and we're running around like trying to like do a mission where we like have to figure out like how to evade the stormtroopers. I'm interested in that. That sounds kind of fun to me, actually. All of a sudden, you're going to travel to a Galactic Starcruiser for 2 days for $6,000, and one of the highlights is going to be a galactic singer. Like I've never shown up to a Star Wars movie and been like, I can't wait for the musical number. Like, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Is there an audience for that? Probably, but it's not the general audience. It's not the people who have loved Star Wars for years.
I think for me, and what you're describing, Jay, is those were all the aspects and qualities that was supposed to go into Galaxy's Edge. That was supposed to be part of that land that was included with your ticket. While they didn't add that in there, so it's like, okay, well, how can we utilize this? Oh yeah, we'll charge people $6,000 to experience all the things that they thought they were going to get in Galaxy's Edge.
And that's why it was left out, probably on purpose, because they knew they were going to charge you the Starcruiser stuff, right? Because we were asking that on many videos, right? So it's like, why would they cut the restaurant out? That's why.
Yeah.
That's
which is crazy, because if you did Galaxy's Edge, if you did that experience in Galaxy's Edge and did it well, that would be more likely to drive people to the Starcruiser. Like, oh, that was so cool, I'll go spend more time over there. Yeah. So that's what I mean, is like they didn't really test it on a smaller scale to say whether or not this would work. They just went, immersion is what we need, just greenlight it.
That does make sense, because with the lackluster of Galaxy's Edge, I'm not saying that it was a complete blunder by all means, but I think the expectation bar was set very high for that, and when people went into the land, they're like, oh, this isn't what we expected, we wanted more. So it already kind of set up. Maybe that's what it did it for me. Maybe that's why at the gate, maybe I'm like looking at the Starcruiser saying, oh, this thing is dead on death's door, because of the experience that I had with Galaxy's Edge. Not a bad one, but it was a okay one. So it's like, so if I'm thinking it's okay included with my park ticket, why would I pay more money to get another lackluster experience? Because for me, I'm probably nitpicking this, because as I said, I'm also, believe it or not, I'm a story guy. It's like, as I said, I follow cinema, I follow directing, producing, editing, writing, all that stuff. I got my degree in it. When you have performers and actors that have to work around a normal based audience that are part of the story, the acting of the actors, which is not their fault, but it's because it's what they have to do, the acting doesn't seem surreal. See, when you're filming something, you do take after take. It's like, oh no, I needed something a little bit more out of you. You have to be more compelling, more driven. But when you have to do basically a one take, and you're including people who don't have that mindset of like, okay, of acting, the actors have to play down to the guests. And for me, when you watch a Star Wars film, but then when you watch these actors have to portray a subpar performance, it dilutes the experience for me.
Yeah,
that's fair. Another thing that I think did hurt it, and this is kind of to your point a little bit earlier, George, about how you said moving it outside of Walt Disney World, you know, whether it be Vegas or somewhere else. I think that might have, I don't know if it would have saved it, but I think it might have. What happened?
Move it to Pahrump.
Pahrump, right? Yeah, exactly. No, what it could have done is maybe it wouldn't have saved it, but what it would have done is, here's the issue: when you go to Walt Disney World, you're already spending a week there. Chances are, because there's so many parks, you're already spending thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. So now Disney's asking you, on top of the several thousand you're already spending, here's one experience for 3 days now for thousands more. Yeah. So it's a lot to ask of a family to add that onto their Disney World thing that's already super expensive. So if it was a standalone thing, it might have worked because it's not as much of a financial burden if it's its own thing. But I still don't think, because to Jay's credit, I think it's because I like the concept too. I think it's a cool concept, but it's the execution. So I think, yeah, like maybe it would have lasted 2 years instead of one if you would have moved it. But at the end of the day, it probably would have ended up failing, because you're right. A lot of people right now, at least, are not into the sequel trilogy. That might change when nostalgia kind of kicks in 20 years. Who knows? They would have been better off doing different eras or something like that. You know, it just wasn't there.
And I think they could have done. I mean, okay, so I'm like a really big escape room person. I love escape rooms. They're so fun to me. Like, I love doing them. So that level of like, you're in a story and like you're the main character and you have to figure out how to like do different things, I think is really cool. However, I'm not into some kinds of escape rooms, right? Like, if you said to me, this is a scare room and it's all themed around like Freddy Krueger, I'm like, nah, I'm out. Like, it's not really it's not really my thing, right?
Right.
But in fact, there's a couple of escape rooms out in Florida that I really want to do, because one of them I believe is Jurassic Park, and the other one's Back to the Future or something like that. I think, I can't remember the two rooms, but
okay, on City Walk.
Yes, on City Walk. Yes, I can't wait to do those. That sounds amazing. But my point is like, if there are multiple different ways to make something like the Starcruiser work, but I don't think it's almost like they went all into one specific way of doing it, right? Like, if you told me like, look, we have a half-day package available, and the half-day package is and it's more geared towards that package is more geared towards adults, meaning it's a little bit more complex. The storyline's a little bit more complex. It has an escape room kind of a vibe to it. It's a little bit more sophisticated, so like your little kids can't really like do it as well. And it's a half-day experience. It's $500. You can tack it onto your Disney World experience, and you're going to experience the whole thing is that there is a Star Destroyer that is being attacked by the rebellion, and you have to defend it with the rest of the stormtroopers. I'd be like, dude, do you know how amazing that sounds to me? That sounds phenomenal. Like, I will be there. Right. That sounds really fun to me. But when you say like it's the whole vibe of the thing is that it's it's an era where everything is like new and it's really cool looking, and we're gonna have this experience where this person sings to you. I mean, like, none of that is speaking Star Wars that I want to be a part of, right? Like, right. And I think Rey is one of my favorite characters. I love Rey. I really like Kylo Ren, but like, let's face it, like, Kylo Ren and Rey have a little small role in that larger storyline that's taking place on that Starcruiser, and none of that stuff just doesn't appeal to me, and it's outside my price range. So even though I'm kind of in the realm of somebody who might want to buy it, it's still not made for me. The elements of the execution are not targeted towards me. And if I was somebody who, my buddy Justin, shout out to Justin, he was like, you guys got to do the Void. And so we went and did the Void, right? That was the experience in downtown Disney. I did it in downtown Disney, where you put a VR headset on, you had a computer strapped to your back, they gave you a legit gun, and then you walked through and it was a computer game, and all the rooms were done up in the computer realm. So when you walked through a doorway, like, you were literally walking through a real life doorway. There's a switch on the wall one time. There's a switch in the game and a switch on the wall. Your hand in the game would go up, grab the switch, and pull it down, and it was the computer knew that the switch on the wall was the switch in the game. So you looked like in the game you were grabbing the switch, and in real life there was a switch, and you went ka-tink, and it changed it like turned off the lights or whatever it did, right?
Dude, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
they perfectly matched it where your digital world was perfectly laid over the real world that they had. Oh, that's incredible.
And bro, they had one room where you were sitting on an elevator, and these graphics were like maybe like 2000 era graphics. These are not even awesome graphics. They're like, they're a little bit pixelated. And you got on an elevator, and it like took you across this lava. And you were like, holy shit, if I fall off the side, I'm going to burn alive in lava. Like, it was like crazy realistic, right? I'm super into that stuff. But again, that experience was you were fighting stormtroopers and then Vader showed up. That was that era. So it was a completely different kind of thing. It was again a little bit more adult because you were actually shooting at stormtroopers and like they would die, right? Like so it was not like this kind of like kitschy sort of like somebody will be singing and then I'll slip you a piece of paper and maybe you go talk to this other person and they like, have some jokes that they tell, and then you go down into this boiler room and try to figure out like how it wasn't kitschy and stuff like that, right? Like it was like, no, this felt like I was in the old school Star Wars.
And even if something was like that, certain storylines work with that kind of material. Star Wars does not fit that persona.
That's a great point, George. That is a great point. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, you could do like maybe like a I don't even know what, like if you had a Clue Hotel or something, right? Like based on the board game, you can kind of have that kind of thing. But with Star Wars, not so much.
Or like Zootopia, if it's themed as Zootopia, and you're like, oh, it's kind of fun, like the kids for the kids, like right? Alice in Wonderland, you can go either way, right? Like Alice in Wonderland, you can get crazy, or you can go into like it's for kids. But yeah, you're right, George. If it was themed a little bit differently, but Star Wars doesn't really feel like it fits that.
No,
yeah,
it doesn't. And the interior aesthetics, I felt like could have been much better, especially like with the dining area. It looked like a hospital cafeteria to me. It like there was nothing that set aside to say, ooh, when I look at that is appealing. Like when I go inside Rise of the Resistance, that to me looks like a freaking film set.
Or even Oga's Cantina.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
incredible.
Even like the aesthetics, even for those are phenomenal. So why not put that into the Galactic Starcruiser? Honestly, I will say the one thing I was very impressed with was some of the aliens that were meeting up, like with a lot of like the costumes with the prosthetics and the makeup and everything. Some of those alien characters were very cool to look at, I will say. But is it $6,000 worth? Absolutely not. But I just wish that they would just integrate that into Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah,
I really wish that.
You know what it felt more like? It felt more like, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but this is what it felt like. It felt like the Captain EO experience in real life.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, there you go.
It didn't have, and so if you wanted to be a little bit nicer, you could say it felt like kind of a Star Tours-y experience in real life, right? Where it's like the kitschy side of Star Wars. And so I understand that, I do really enjoy Star Tours, but to me, Star Tours is like a parody of Star Wars. It's not like actual Star Wars in my mind. I don't really like, it's kind of fun to be on like a Star Tour and then it gets involved in the movies, and that's kind of crazy, but that's not what I'm looking to like LARP as. If I'm going to be LARPing, I'm not going to be like, I'm getting on a Star Tour and I'm going to go see Naboo, right? Like I want to be involved in like Stormtrooper training or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Like, I want to like go on a bounty hunt with the Din Djarin. You know what I mean? Like, cool. That's something that sounds really, really fun to me. And that just didn't work. By the way, I have to tell a really funny story. The internet always wins. So one of the things that Jenny says in her video is that she had dining room seating, because you brought up the dining room and how the dining room was kind of themed. Yeah. And she had dining room seating, and unfortunately, they put her behind like this big pole, so she could barely see the people doing the thing. And then then she kind of complained about like she didn't really get immersed in any of the storylines that were being told on the cruise. or and she said, and so someone goes, what Jenny doesn't realize is that she got the pole storyline, and it was like you're not supposed to be able to see, and you're supposed to like, and they made up this whole like they actually like took screenshots of like the tools and like pole storyline of like you need to figure out how to be able to see the stage, and the internet is undefeated, bro. Like that is so funny. People are hilarious. Shout out to everybody who came up with those jokes.
That is funny. That is funny. now, Jay, I want to ask you because you mentioned Jenny's video. Full disclosure, I haven't seen it yet, but I am planning on watching it. It just kind of long. It's like 4 hours, so I got to really dedicate. Yeah. You know, so, but it looks really, really interesting, and I want to check it out. But you saw it, and you said there were a lot of interesting points being made there, especially with the marketing.
Yes.
If you want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jenny's video is a really good video, and it is longer than the Star Wars experience lasted, right? But no, she does a really good job of breaking things down. One of the things that she talks about that I really agreed with her on, because I've been on OG55 for a long time, saying that I feel like Disney, specifically their PR, but PR and marketing are oftentimes working in tandem to like come up with like a messaging that they're trying to get to people. And she talks about the Galactic Starcruiser marketing and how it really was just out of touch, right? So she covers a few things. One of the things that she covers that's really interesting is and this is not the part that I resonated with as much, but it's really interesting to talk about, and you guys could probably do a whole show on this. But she talks about how all of the marketing from the user generated content, meaning the people who went and experienced it and then did like videos about it, it all felt very awkward and very what word do I want to use? Forced. Because she actually read a script, and she goes, imagine if I were to read you a script from an actual user experience. They would say something like, I did the Star Wars experience over at the Starcruiser, and I was able to do this cool stuff. But instead she goes, but now let me read to you like what each of these influencers was given to read. And it's like, I spent 2 nights at Disney's Galactic Starcruiser experience, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, well, you were told to say that, like you had to read those exact words because you would never say those things. So why is Disney forcing that branding? Why don't they just let people kind of talk about it the way they want to talk about it? And she played a couple clips of like people doing TikTok dances like in the Starcruiser, and it was like, if you're going to try to be immersive and then you're going to show like TikTok dances inside the Starcruiser, like now I'm like I'm like, this is my suspension of disbelief is completely obliterated, because the last thing I want to think about if I'm doing a Star Wars experience is TikTok. You know what I mean?
Right.
So she talked about that. She talked about the videos that Disney took down because they were received so poorly. So there was there's one video where there's people in the cantina. It's part of that longer video where that ABC star, the kid, is like all excited about being
from Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah. And he's like
scream like, Star Wars.
Well, that's part of the thing, right? That's because she's saying, she's like, he goes to the bar. Which let's be honest, I would love to have a drink in that bar. That bar looks amazing. Like I want to hang out in that bar. But like he's having his drink, and then the lady walks in to sing, and then the way that it's filmed, like as opposed to it being from his perspective, now all of a sudden it's like doing close-ups on her as she sings this song, and it doesn't even feel like necessarily like a Star Wars.
And then you get that uncomfortable close-up on him and his reaction to her singing. Yeah. It felt like a very bad after-school special.
Yes,
like it really did.
Yeah, and she even brought up, like, she's like, I'm okay with you going down the kind of kitschy, like this kid's like overly enthused, like a 1950s kind of style. You know what I mean? She's like, I'm okay with even you doing that style, but if you're gonna do that style, like stick to that style the whole way through and make the whole thing kind of like a kitschy kind of marketing play. And I think
it almost felt kind of like during like the election with and this isn't a political statement, but it kind of is in a way. But but it was kind of like you know, Bernie and Hillary, right? Like Bernie was just like, hey, he's Bernie. Bernie hasn't changed in like 50 years. He's the same Bernie from like the 70s. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So when you heard Bernie talk, it was like authentic. It felt authentic. Whether you didn't like him, loved him, hated him, it felt like, okay, that's the real guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then you have Hillary Clinton, who kind of like, it looks like everything's being read. like the
dude.
Disney's Galactic Starcruiser experience, that kind of stuff, right? And people don't like the fakeness, right? Like
Right.
Disney, to put something out there like that, where you have these influencers kind of reading a very obvious script,
Yeah.
it's going to turn people off. You know what I'm saying? It's just not the right marketing.
Well,
and you've been saying it a long time, Jay. The marketing and PR Disney has been bad for a little while now.
It's been bad for a little while, and what it does is it takes out it strips away all of the authenticity. Because like if I'm being authentic, I don't talk in Disney speak, right? Like so if you're gonna do user generated content, that user generated content has to feel like it's authentic. As soon as it feels like I've been paid to do it, suddenly it feels like it's like, wait a minute, I don't have any clue what that person actually thought of that experience because they were paid to do it.
Yeah.
You know, there are certain YouTube channels out there that will say like, we don't go to media events because we want to say what we want to say, and if we're going to say what we want to say, we have to pay for the experience, because otherwise it's not going to be authentic. And if you know that they comped our meal, then then it's going to feel like I'm telling you it's a good meal when it's not a good meal, right? Or whatever. And so I think it comes down to this. Disney's marketing and PR, by the way, I think it's improving. So huge shout out to the changes that are being made by Disney's marketing and their PR groups, because the stuff that I'm seeing in the last 2 to 3 months is vastly superior to what I was seeing last year and a couple years before that. The stuff that I was seeing in the pandemic is the worst Disney marketing I've seen in decades. Like, I just think it's absolutely atrocious. But the stuff that I'm seeing more recently, Disney's making the proper shifts and they're doing a much better job. They were running a campaign recently that was all about people experiencing the magic, and I'm like, that's it, dude. Like, do that all day long.
Right.
But one of the things that I think they were getting wrong is that they didn't know the audience that they were building the Galactic Starcruiser for. They had not identified that audience. They weren't sure how to talk to that audience about the Galactic Starcruiser or any of their other properties. They were experiencing, let's face it, they greenlit something that was predicated on the success of The Rise of Skywalker and the sequel trilogy. Like,
True.
And they greenlit that before, and they didn't make any adjustments. This is the thing that shocks me about the Galactic Starcruiser, is that they didn't try anything else with it, that they just scrapped it all together and said, like, forget it.
Yeah.
Because that to me was like, well, you started building this thing during an era where you didn't realize that your sequel trilogy was going to be received with a lot of issues, right? So you started building the thing, but rather than say, we've had this gigantic investment, why don't we retheme it? They just canceled it altogether, right? Like, they just said, forget it. We're not going to try anything else. I thought that they would make a dinner show out of it. I thought that they'd make it like a half-day experience that people could do.
Right.
They set it in the original trilogy era. I mean, look, if you made that like a long dinner experience, or even if you cordoned off different areas of the ship so that it was like, here's the original trilogy era, there's a whole show around this. Here's the prequel trilogy era, here's the whole show around this. Here's the sequel trilogy era, there's a whole show around this. Like, why not monetize it in that way? I'm confused about why you just killed it altogether.
Yeah, because you're right, Jay. I agree with you. I think it's a good concept, and even like companies like Universal could pick up on this concept work. Imagine if you had a 3-night Wizarding World experience where you stay in Hogwarts and your kids can learn magic spells and stuff like that. It'd be really fun, really cool experience, and cozy as hell. I sleep like a baby in that castle. You know what I'm saying? A little candlelight and everything, you know. But that concept, I think, is a solid concept, you know. But the execution was just terrible.
Well, okay, so you just made another point that I think that George had made earlier that I think is absolutely true as well. You could have just made it a hotel with a bunch of various experiences that you could participate in or not as a part of your Disney experience. And you could have made it a deluxe hotel. It's $800 a night to stay here. Well, now 3 nights cost me $2,400, but guess what? I would have spent $2,400 on Grand Floridian. But this is just Star Wars themed. And to your guys' points, I'm going to send the kids off to do the lightsaber training, but I'm going to go hang out at the margarita bar, the space margarita bar. Like, in other words, they dictated things that were going to be like, this is the only way to do this experience. But there were lots of different ways to do that experience that could have been cool. Like,
well, and that's the other thing too. They lock you in there for 3 days. Where it's like you were saying, if you had the freedom, like a regular hotel, to the adults can go out of the hotel, come back. The kids can be doing their lightsaber training. Have it be $800. That would have been such a better, I think, outcome for that. What do you think, George? Would that have been something you possibly would have done? Maybe take Josh or whatever to something like that, as opposed to the Starcruiser?
Yeah, absolutely. If it was something like a Star Wars hotel with an experience kind of thing,
Right.
if you choose to, then yeah, absolutely. Because then we're the ones choosing of how we want to live out our Star Wars adventure. As Jay had said, if we're going to sit at the bar, have some specialty Star Wars drinks, that's for us. If the kids want to do lightsabers with Chewie, go for it. It's like that to me, I think would have had more leg life, so to speak, than just doing something like this. As I said, the concept, yeah, I could understand how they can end up doing something like that with like Star Wars, and also like, as you mentioned, OG, with Harry Potter. Hell, you could even maybe do something like that with Pandora, with Avatar, and it's like, if there's a market for it, you could have like a various array of things, but the execution of it, yes, I do agree with you both that it does need to have a certain core effect in order to work, especially if you want it to match the price tag. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, they didn't touch the cruiser after it shut down because it's a tax write-off.
Yeah. There's a amount of time that they have to let it sit there before they can do anything with it. I don't know when that cutoff is, but I think it's coming up though. I don't know. I could be wrong. But I mean
that's just my thing. I mean, me personally, if Imagineers were to come to me and say, "What would you do with it?" I'd burn I'd burn the sucker down, piss on the ashes, get my John Deere tractor, get everything out of there, scoop it up, and literally expand out Galaxy's Edge. That's basically what I would do.
Yeah, because what happens, I think, too, when you go in there. This is the issue too. When you go in there and you try to repurpose it, because it was purpose built for this experience,
right?
You know what I'm saying? So now when you go in there and you try to make it something else, you have to be very careful with that. Otherwise, it feels like a Spirit of Halloween store. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like you could tell it used to be a Forever 21.
So even if they were to do something like, an immersive Star Wars hotel, I personally feel like they would have to demo that whole entire area anyway. And especially even how to even get to the Starcruiser. They put you in the back of like this kind of van thing that you'd think you'd see on the set of Taken. And it's like you see the back end of Galaxy's Edge. You see the lollipop mountains on a stick because you're seeing the back end of Galaxy's Edge. It's just not I don't know how it is coming back, but I do know that when the vloggers would go and then record it, that's what you would see. You would basically just see a road, and it's like, and then they have a toll with a security guard with an orange vest there, and it's like, really, like what kind of transition is that?
You see that from in that van
while you're going, because they have to open you up to get to that area.
Yeah, so it's not while you're in the van; it's when you're pulling up. You're in your own car. And you're pulling up to the experience, there's a parking lot for the Starcruiser, right? So when the van is a separate experience. The van is what takes you from the Starcruiser to Galaxy's Edge and back.
Right.
Yeah,
and that doesn't have any windows or anything in it.
Correct.
You're just in there. Okay, I understood. Gotcha. Yeah.
But even to that, it's like I don't know. Just
theme the
I think
right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It just looked like a normal security guard with an orange vest,
right.
like standing there, like with a toll, and he hits the button and it goes up. It's
he's canon now, bro. He's canon now.
And see, me personally too, and I get that they wanted to attach a Galaxy's Edge experience to it, but I think that also hindered the notion. It's like, if you're going to be on this thing, you have to keep people on it. So even to Disney is saying, "Wow, we didn't even have enough in here to fill up a whole entire day, that we have to send people out of this thing into Galaxy's Edge." It's like there should be enough in there to keep people occupied.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea that with that was like kind of like how when you do a Disney cruise, you go to Cabo and you dock and then you kind of go and explore and you come back. I think they kind of wanted to do that kind of vibe because they're going with the cruise kind of thing, But I see what you're saying. But
Well,
then
it's
again, but then you get off and you get kidnapped by Kylo Ren again when you ride Rise of the Resistance.
Exactly. That's it. It's like no matter where you go, you're kidnapped by Kylo Ren.
Bob Shakeback, he has a fantasy of getting kidnapped by Kylo Ren. We all know,
right?
that.
It's his thing. It's his thing.
Yeah.
Now, what do you guys think? Jay, I'll start with you. What do you think? Okay, so cool concept. Execution was really bad. If you were in charge, Jay, what would be specific things you would have done to improve this experience to make it work?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I would have done is I would have done tests. I'm really big, like when I talk to my clients that I'm working with that are startups, I'm always really big on like, and even when I was doing my film, right? Like I want to learn the things I need to learn before I get on set and I'm filming that day, right? I want to learn. If I work with some people that are doing a table read for me, how do I give them direction that makes their performance a little bit better? This worked with them, but this didn't work with them. And everyone's a little bit different, but you can learn things. Like when I say, like for example, I was telling somebody earlier that I was helping them with their website, and I go, this website has to talk to you not as if you're a corporate entity, but as if you're talking to your aunt and uncle. Right? Like that's the kind of vibe we need to have. So you learn how to say these things to people in a way that then produces a result that you like. So I would have micro tested this experience. I would have tested doing LARPing as a Star Wars night activity or something beforehand. And I said, what are we going to learn from this? I would have ran 3 different tests. I would have said, let's test the original trilogy era LARPing in Disney World on a Star Wars night. Let's test the sequel trilogy era, and let's test the prequel trilogy era. Which one sells out the best? Which one do people come back with the best surveys that they said that this is what they liked? I would have had them do different things in Galaxy's Edge as far as missions go. Pulled people out into a focus group and said, what if we do this today? Is that fun for you or not? I would have loved to see them do that to start off with. But now that we've seen it kind of crash and burn, your question is like, what should they do? What should they do moving forward, or what should they have done differently to begin with?
Well, yeah. First part of the question was, what should they have done that would have been more successful for this? And then now, what would they do going forward with maybe other experience or even other franchises?
Yeah.
Now, like what could they learn from this, basically?
So here's where I think that they overstepped, and we've all said this in different ways. But I think they would have been far more successful if they had said, this is the Disneyland or the Disney World Hotel Star Wars experience, and it's themed to Star Wars. And maybe even you have different towers that you could stay in, right? Here's the original trilogy tower. Here's the sequel trilogy tower. Here's the other prequel or the sequel trilogy, whatever. So I think that it would have been better as a hotel that had experiences tied to it. For example, if you wanted to go to Hollywood Studios, you boarded through an airlock, and you did get in one of those trucks that George was talking about, and that was your bus to get to the parks. But it felt like you were getting this special kind of parks experience because you were staying at the Star Wars hotel. Right. But you didn't have to do that if you didn't want to. You could go get in your car and drive over to Epcot if you wanted to, right? Like, so make it more of a traditional hotel experience with additional LARPing elements if you wanted to participate in them, but they're an hour long, they're 2 hours long, they're 4 hours long. It's not going to take your whole day. It's not a cruise where you're doing that separately.
Right.
That to me would have been wildly successful, and people would be clamoring for more.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think because then your price points are like $700 or $800.
Yeah.
That alone will bring people in. The freedom to go in and out, like you said, you get the kind of themed experience, right? Where you can go from the hotel to Hollywood Studios in that van, inside the van theme, so you feel like you're actually like, oh, this is kind of cool, Yep. So much potential there, George, with you, same 2 questions that I asked Jay. What would you have done to improve the Starcruiser, besides burning it down?
John Deere, he had his John Deere. He was out there.
John Deere, and number 1, and number 2, what can Disney learn from this experience going forward?
So I think that if Disney wanted to do something like this, I feel like the description of how they were making this, because I literally followed this concept literally from the very beginning, because I would go to all the D23 expos, minus this year's, but don't even get me started. But I would follow it literally piece by piece. That each expo I would go to, they would have a little bit more information on, what this thing was going to be about, and nothing to it intrigued me. And I feel like now that we're actually sitting down and discussing it, it was those keywords that kind of like threw me off. And it was like experience. And, you're in here for 2 nights, you do this, you do that. We'll have a price point for you later on. When I heard that, I knew that was going to be a freaking arm and a leg when they couldn't even say the price, because they know 7,000 people in the audience, all eyes are on you. It's like, yeah, I'm not giving that price tag out. It's going to go on the internet. So I just certain key elements was just throwing me off. And I feel if Disney would have done something to the notion, again, of how I said earlier, I honestly wouldn't have put something like this in a theme park resort complex. To me, I just don't see the demographic for it, because the bigger demographic is people are there for a relaxing / enjoyable / thrilling vacation. They want to go to the theme parks. They want to ride rides. That's what if you have young kids, they want to meet Mickey and Minnie Mouse. They want to meet the princesses. They want to see the parades. They don't want to do this ultimate fan Star Wars experience where you're locked up for 2 nights and you can't get out. And it's for me, I think this would have worked with a bigger demographic, that if they did something, as I said, like a traveling kind of thing where they took it like on the road, so to speak, went from city to city, state to state, maybe do something like that. Or OG, you had mentioned something like a Vegas, or maybe in the LA area, something where it would tie into the film franchise itself. For me, I feel like they took 2 very different concepts of a theme park vacationing complex and an experience like how you mentioned, like you like escape rooms. Mm-hmm. This falls under the same category in a way. It's not an escape room, but it falls into that demographic type of thing. For me, and I know that you had mentioned to the fact of, because they have the Back to the Future and the Jurassic Park one down in City Walk, but now that's actually another thing too. Maybe this is something that they could have attached onto Disney Springs. Because that way that people are going there. They've been to Disney Quest, so they've done stuff like that. I would have just kept it out of the theme park element. And of course, the price tag for that was just, they were asking for way too much.
Well, it's too much considering how much you're already paying to be there at Disney World. So you're, like I said before, you're paying thousands. And now here, surprise, here's a few more thousand to stay in this hotel, and you can't leave. You're stuck in there, So
and I say for Disney moving forward, please don't ever do anything like this again. Honestly, it's like it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the demographic of audience that they're trying to appeal to.
Yeah, and I don't think they will do it again. I think this was such a huge failure. At least not this way. Maybe they'll try something different but similar. But the way they did this, there's no way they'll do this again.
Yeah. And I really hope that the space that they took up for this thing, expand out Hollywood Studios. The park needs it. It needs an expansion. Expand out Galaxy's Edge. Make it even bigger so you can fit more stuff in it. Let's get some more droids in there. Let's get some more aliens. Let's get the banthas in there. Let's get that restaurant in there. Let's get a third e-ticket attraction. Like let's flesh out this land that it actually deserves, because when you actually go in, the aesthetics of the land are phenomenal.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's perfect. But I always compare Galaxy's Edge. It's like a boiling pot of hot water with no meat and potatoes in it.
Right. Yeah. No. And I feel like a lot of especially when we're dealing with Chapek and stuff, I do feel like his mindset was like, okay, we'll cancel the restaurant in Galaxy's Edge because we're going to offer that same kind of experience on the Starcruiser, and we want that to be the selling point for the Starcruiser. So they sort of stripped the land a little bit, or even a lot, to kind of fill in this Starcruiser experience. I think that was a mistake, huge mistake, you know. And I think going forward, I think I think what they'll do is probably something similar to what Jay was saying. I think they might do something where maybe it'll be Star Wars, maybe it'll be Marvel or something like that. It'll be a hotel, and you'll have these LARPing elements in there, but it won't be as rigid where you're trapped in there for 3 days. It'll be like a deluxe hotel, you know. Pricing wise, I think that might be the future. You know, I don't think they've given up completely on like kind of bringing more theme park into the hotels, but I think it's not going to be as Renaissance fair as this one was. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's going to be a little bit more normie friendly. You know, I mean, look, you know, for the diehard Star Wars nerds in that niche, it might have been somewhat appealing if they could afford it, but for everybody else, they're like, go ahead, George.
See, I think now that I'm thinking about it, it almost seems like Disney kind of shot themselves in the foot with this notion, because I've also seen this out of Disneyland with the Star Wars After Hours event. When I went to that, you had a lot of those character meet and greets. You had the Jawas, you had the Ewoks, you had you even had the Emperor make an appearance. You know, you had Darth Maul, Darth Vader. You know, there was just a lot going on. But that was for, an extra upcharge.
They even had Kathleen Kennedy. You could meet her right next to the Emperor.
Yes. I thought that person looked familiar.
He's over there selling the Force's female shirts.
What was I saying? Oh, yes. Yes. So that was an extra upcharge event.
Yeah.
So every time that they do something that's incorporating with Star Wars, they do give you what you're asking for, but as long as you pay for it. And that's where I feel like that Galaxy's Edge may kind of lose that appeal to that notion, because is Disney really going to want to give up those kind of after hour events or kind of hard premium ticket things, even just like the Starcruiser? Because that was the whole point. It was like, you want to see these aliens? Good, pay for it. You want to have a Star Wars experience? Good, pay for it. Right. So I feel like now if they start putting all this into Galaxy's Edge, is Disney going to retract back?
Well, that's the thing. They clearly have. I mean, they have Ewoks. They have Ewoks. They could put Ewoks in Galaxy's Edge today if they wanted to. They could put the Emperor in there today if they wanted to. They could put. I mean, there's all those characters. You're right. I think it's like purposely holding back so we can save these for the paywall. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that either. You know, and for me, it's like, okay, fine. Like so maybe the biggies, you know, like the Emperor and all that. Maybe you put them behind a paywall. But can't we just even get some like original droids and aliens in the land walking around? I'd settle for like a knockoff K2SO. I don't care. Like just something cool looking, you know what I'm saying? Like give us something, you know. But I will give them credit though. They have, I don't know, Jay, if you've seen these, but these little automated BD droids are really cute.
Those are cool.
Yeah, those are really cool. So that they are playing and they are inserting a little bit more than before, but it's a slow process. Go ahead, George.
You can have you said a knockoff droid, and all I'm thinking is W2 AM FM.
AM FM, right?
Radio Shack droid. I think it's interesting because this concept is not a concept that I have ever heard of before in any context, particularly the mainstream, right? Like so the closest comparison we have is a cruise, right? But the problem with a cruise is a giant boat. And yes, you are limited to the water, but you know you're going to get off and go on excursions. You know you're going to be able to do this is like literally you need to arrive at this point so that you can do all of the things you paid for. A cruise is not like that. A cruise is like, do you want to wake up late and go to the buffet? Do you want to go to the bar? Do you want to go to the casino? Do you want to go to the pool? Do you want to go play trivia? I mean, like you have this like width and breadth of choices that you can participate in or not participate in. They're not like you don't get on a Disney cruise and they're like, well, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. you better get up and we're going to knock on your door because Tinkerbell's meeting people and you want to meet Tinkerbell, right? Like that's not the way a Disney cruise works. So the closest thing that we know of to what this
being that her meet and greet has been taken out of Walt Disney World, they better jump at that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. It's the only way. It's the upcharge to meet Tinkerbell. But given the fact that like there's no other experience, that the closest experience like this is still not like this, it just is like it's just too weird for people. It's like I don't understand what you're asking. Are you asking me to participate in a 48-hour or even longer, a 60-hour escape room? Because that's a long escape room, man. I usually am in an escape room for 60 minutes and I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. So I think it's just a weird. The concept is interesting, but the execution doesn't work. And it's just, I don't know how to rectify that. There's not like, you almost have to start from scratch and go, what concepts do we know that work? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a very different thing. So I don't know.
And maybe that's what Disney learns from it going forward. Maybe they don't necessarily do something similar ever again, but they take certain elements of this experience that they learn from and incorporate that into attractions and restaurants. So it's kind of like the old car, right? That you can't ever use the old car again, but maybe some of the parts you can sort of reuse. It might be something like that, you know?
Well, I'm really interested in knowing what Disney will learn from this, because I know that one of the things that will happen, because this happens every time, is that there will be a bunch of fans who will, when some of these Imagineers that were very involved in this have another project, they're going to go like, that project is going to suck because that Imagineer's on it, right? Then they were involved in that other thing that sucked. I actually think that that's a false dichotomy. That is not the way the world works. When you fail at something, usually it is so crushing to you that you make note of it, you take lessons from it, and you go, I don't want to let that happen to me again. So you actually have a better understanding of what not to do than somebody who has only succeeded. So there's a certain amount of people that like all they've done is succeed, and I'm like, just wait, dude, because when they fail, it is going to be. I'll throw out there. I'll give you an example. Justin Timberlake with his latest tour, right? Like this is a guy who has succeeded at almost everything. Once he left, he was the one that broke away from NSYNC. He's the one that had a stellar career. And then now all of a sudden people are making fun of him on TikTok because he's kind of dancing like a dad out on stage, right? Like he had never experienced things that were like, dude, you can't do that because that's too cheesy or that's too cringy, as the kids might say, or whatever. And I think that like, so these Imagineers who worked on this, I actually am excited to see what they work on next, because I think you can take a lot of lessons from this experience and go, oh, that's not the way we do it. But if you take this microcosm of what really did work, that's actually awesome. Jenny has in her video, she has a clip of, and she calls it a fan film, which is hilarious. But shout out to Hey Bricky, because it's Hey Bricky's clip. And he's acting like he needs to be somewhere. He's dressed up in his Star Wars outfit, and he's acting like he spills spice all over the ground, like the drug, the spice. And he's like, "Oh no, I spilled my spice all over the place." He's like freaking out and like having like a meltdown. And she's like, "This Star Wars fan film is pretty interesting," or whatever she says, and she shows a clip from it, and she spells "Hey Bricky" wrong, which I thought was really funny. I'm really bummed out for him. But so shout out to Hey Bricky, because he does an awesome. He appears in her video, and his fan film is what she calls it. Is actually really funny and cool. But the point is like, okay, so Bricky took this amazingly themed room, right? And he was like, this is legit design. He's all about design. He's like, I look like a Star Wars character in a Star Wars environment, and I'm going to pretend like I have this spice and pretend like that that I'm not, because why is he doing that? He's not supposed to be doing that in this clean Disney experience, but it's a funny kind of thing of like, what if you worked in a little bit of non-Disney friendly content into this bathroom? And that should be an experience of like someone took the time to film a really creative video in this environment we created. Like they're not just going around filming the user generated content of like, what does it feel like to do? He made it his own thing, right? Like, so like, that's a lesson of like, look what happens when we design a space so well that someone could film a fan film in it and feel like this is awesome. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a huge successful lesson. What's a really big, not successful lesson? Have people doing TikTok dances on the middle of your Starcruiser, because guess what? Never in Star Wars has anyone pulled out TikTok and done a stupid fucking dance on the Star Destroyer. That's the dumbest idea you've ever heard of. Don't do that again. That's a lesson. Don't have the people come. Don't have your PR department come in and be like, you know what we should do with all the TikTokers? Have them do a dance on the middle of this Starcruiser. Like, talk about ruining the immersion that you keep talking about. Bricky made it more immersive. These people made it less immersive. Don't do that again. So there's like lessons to be. I think there's a lot of really, really powerful lessons to be learned. And I'm looking forward to the next generation, or this generation of Imagineers who have learned those lessons and see what they turn it into. Because I think it could be actually pretty powerful. No,
absolutely. That's a great point. And you're right, Jay. You learn more from failure than you ever do from winning.
Yep.
You know, the failures are really what mold you going forward. Even Walt Disney, the failure of Oswald and losing that character is what birthed Mickey Mouse, the most iconic character of all time. You know, so there's a lot to learn, a lot to glean from failure. Absolutely, and yeah, it's interesting, and you make some great points there, Jay. What do you think, George, about what Jay was saying about this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I can't.
Always with the comedy. By the way, speaking of Hey Bricky, I want Hey Bricky to react to our Hey Bricky reaction. That'd be great.
Yes. Bricky to react to us reacting to him. That'd be fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, George.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with Jay, and I feel like Disney has learned over the course of time, but yet there's still like a piece of it where it keeps on retracting back, especially with Star Wars. And we've talked about this several times on the show before during the Star Wars weekends that they used to have at Hollywood Studios. Now, I love how they just included like the whole entire canon. You know, they didn't worry about, timelines. It's like they had all the characters at once. They even had the Fab Five dress up in their favorite Star Wars characters and attire. That's awesome. That's cool. But then they kind of got a little bit carried away where you'd see Boba Fett twerking and you'd see Darth Vader doing MC Hammer and the Michael Jackson moonwalk. It's that was like so cringy to watch. It was
you lost me with that.
Yeah, and it was like, but the crowds loved it, but it was like in that moment. But when you watch it as a whole and then you kind of go back, it's like it's supposed to be like a fine wine. It's supposed to mellow with age, and it didn't, and it's like, and Disney has to remember that even if something doesn't work and it may be a project that fallen off or they canceled or they got rid of, especially now with social media, it'll always be around. It'll always be out there. So you have to find something that, of course, everything's not going to work 100% at the time. I get it. That's what a great artist does. You try something. If it fails, whatever, you pick yourself back up, try something new. But it always just seems like Disney keeps on going around that same circle. And with the notion, and this is why I mentioned this too, I'm a little bit concerned that if they do decide to put a mainstream permanent area for the villains in the park, the Disney villains, it cannot be cutesied up. It can't be diluted down. And I worry about that because I want the villains to have their own land. But the route that Disney always takes with something that is a little bit more on the edgier side, they always try to find a way to kind of pull it back. And I feel like that's what they do with Star Wars. Marvel,
well said.
They kind of, in a way, but they kind of let Marvel do their own thing. Me personally, I think they're afraid of Feige. It's like, but like it's like even with Deadpool, Even Ryan Reynolds came out with a statement and said he's greatly appreciative of Disney, but yet he's shocked that Deadpool 3 still got an R rating for the film. Because when you think of Disney, it's like, oh, is Disney really going to do that? And thank God they did, because I feel like the appeal for Deadpool would have just went from the highest of the high to the lowest of low. But I feel like they do that all the time with Star Wars, and I don't know why. I feel like that they try to Disney-fy it. Just let Star Wars be Star Wars.
That's well said, George. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's something going on with that, and that's kind of a bigger conversation too, because it's kind of leads into, I think, a lot of management and stuff like that, which, I think we all kind of agree there is time for a change with that. And although according to YouTube, I think she's already been fired like 7 times now or something like that. So I don't know. Is she still there? Who knows? So, I don't know. Every other week we get another Kathleen Kennedy rumor, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I hope they learn, like what you were saying, Jay. I hope they learn from this experience. I hope they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know what I'm saying? I think there are some good things here you can maybe implement in other areas, in other ways, and we'll kind of see where they go with it, But yeah, hopefully they just don't learn the wrong lessons, because Disney likes to do that sometimes. They like to learn the wrong lessons, and hopefully in this case, that's not the case. So we'll see. We will see. But gentlemen, always a fantastic time talking shop with you guys. Really good having you on, Jay, again. Thank you so much, brother, for coming on, talking Star Wars, talking Starcruiser with us. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
It is always a pleasure to talk to the two of you guys. I'm always up for it when I have the time. I love it. I'm over at How Stories Work with Jay Shear. Like I mentioned, I got some new content coming out because I finally had some time to work on a video. So you can check out my Citizen Kane explained video, which would be a deep dive into Citizen Kane and explaining what it all means and why it means that. And then also you can catch me right here on OG 55, Orange Grove 55, where I have the Story Geek Show. And George has a fantastic idea that we're going to pull off in a few weeks or so. You can catch me on all of those places, and sometimes I'm on Twitter. Very rarely I'm on Twitter, but sometimes.
How does it feel
Jay's like when he says sometimes on Twitter, he's like that rare Disney character meetup that you don't know is going to happen, but he just happens to pop up somewhere, and it's like
there it is.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I've actually pulled back a little bit myself on Twitter in the past week or so, because I have anxiety disorder. And I've had it since I was a kid, since I was 16. But lately, I've been getting these panic attacks again, and I'm like, okay, Twitter's not the place for me to be right now. You know what I'm saying? So I've been kind of staying off of it, but it feels kind of good. I kind of see what you're saying, Jade. It feels it's almost like addictive not being on it.
Yeah, it's better not being on there. I mean, it just gives you, there's a lot of Twitter likes to amplify extremism. Right. And so then your brain has to deal with that extremism, and that's difficult because now you have to. It never amplifies well-stated nuance. It only amplifies extremism, and that's an anxiety-producing thing. So good for you for getting off it for a little while.
Yeah, it feels good. Absolutely. And and now especially with the guy running Twitter, who's the king of going crazy with toxicity all over the place. So it's it's just it's like the inmates are running the asylum basically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, George, what about you, sir? Where can they find you on social media? Where can they find your militant pixie duster ass?
So you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano, and of course you can find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There it is. And comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we discussed today, the Starcruiser, what Disney might learn from the failure of the Starcruiser. Why do you think it failed? How could it have been better? We would love to hear from you. Comment down below. And as always, may the Force be with you.